Welcome to the Mom Founders Table. Pull up a chair and join me every week as I become your thought partner and help you lead to create change. I'm your host, Kelsey Kenry, entrepreneur, millionaire mom of three, and strategic business coach for established mom entrepreneurs. Every week, you will get tactical guidance to apply to your business, leadership, and life that will help you further your true success while also being invited into a new way of thinking and being that creates true freedom. I'm here to call you out and call you up, so take a seat and let's begin. Welcome back to another episode of the Mom Founders Table, and I am very stoked today because this is a hot topic for me right now, what we're talking about. I literally just posted in my Instagram stories today that I got some of my homeschool curriculum for my kids. So I'm so excited to talk to Meghan today because not only me, but so many of my clients have had conversations about homeschooling as entrepreneurs and realizing the school system isn't necessarily where we want our kids, and teaching them to have all of these skills that the public school system is not teaching. And it's very overwhelming. So I'm going to let Meghan intro herself, but I have to say that Meghan actually was a client of mine and I'm obsessed with her work. She has created something really, really special locally in our community, but her ability to design programming and curriculum and just take the weight off of people is so cool. So Meghan, thanks for giving me your very, very valuable time today. Tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
Thanks, Kelsey. I'm excited to be here and love this topic. As you know, it's super near and dear to me. So I've been in education for 15 or so years. I started as a classroom teacher forever ago. So I have a lot of experience within the actual school system. And then I moved on to get my master's degree in instructional design and educational technology, which led me into the private sector, where I work as an instructional designer. I do a lot with higher ed, building their master's programs online. Did a lot in COVID with that. That was a really fun time for us where everything had to move online overnight. And so I actually led a team that worked with many universities and moved all of their in-person classes to the online forum. So that was fun. I do a lot in K-12 and publisher provider sector. And that really led me to, once I had my own children and they were ready to go to school, I realized I didn't want them in public education and I wanted them home and kind of have more control over what they learned and how they learned it and when they learned it. So that led me to homeschool my three kids. I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And they've homeschooled their whole existence so far and will continue to do so. So that has led me to creating a local program, Mindful Leaders Academy and Innovation Labs, where we create a local system for parents to come and get really high-end education, but in a local forum.
Yeah, it's something that just struck me that you said is the decision, right? So this is what I told you when we were working together too, is bringing our listeners behind the curtain for a second. This is literally a decision that I wrestled with for so long. And I remember telling my husband at one point, I'm like, I feel so guilty every single time I drop my kids off at school. I feel like it's free babysitting. And it was beyond all of it, the education and starting to see that my kids weren't thriving in certain areas. And there were so many things, but it really is making the decision is so hard. So how you have this background that you were in the school system. So what drove you to make the decision of okay, I'm homeschooling. This is not the place for my kid.
Yeah. So being in schools, and also once I worked in the private sector, I partnered with people all over the country that work in education. And surprisingly, or maybe not, everyone I work with homeschools in every state. So that's just something, if you're in education, you certainly have seen enough behind the curtain to start feeling like it's just not what you want. And I always want to be really careful because I have nothing against teachers. I think teachers work incredibly hard and do everything they possibly can. The problem isn't that teachers aren't trying to provide quality education, it's that the system is set up to fail. And they are only capable to do so much with the resources they're given and the time they have, the number of students that they're serving with diverse needs. So for me, just knowing what is provided in schools and even just what the student experiences in school, especially these days, it's different than when we were growing up. And I just knew that that was something I really wanted my kids to avoid, some of those social challenges, and also get really strong curriculum that was, led by them. My daughter, she's so focused in entrepreneurship right now. She wants to do everything with understanding like a business model and budgeting. She wants to know how to create a website. She talks a lot about marketing. Those are things that we can dive into and we can follow her lead rather than be like, no, sorry, that's not in the curriculum workbook for today based on our standardized test guide. So it's just a really special thing to be able to customize your education for your kiddo and then also have so much more time with them for family and fun and activities and exploration because they're only young so long.
It's so true. It's so true. And as much as it's sometimes hard being around them literally 24/7, it also is like, I know it's one of those things. I'm going to look back and I'm going to be like, thank goodness that I did. Because I want my kids to be adults that want to still hang out with their parents, and I think that a lot of it is really about that for me of like the emotional, there's like the strategic decision of like the logical reasoning of the control of the curriculum and things like that, but then and being it letting it be like child led, and then there's also like the emotional piece of like the connection of like my kids when they were in school, it's like we would leave our house at like 7:45 and they're getting home at like 3:45. That's a really long time. And my kids go to bed at 7 o'clock. So it's like it wasn't giving us that much time. So like the question of the day here, because I know all of my listeners are already thinking about this and I already know what the answer is, but I want to dive deeper into this. Can you run a business and homeschool?
You can. You can. It's possible. Yeah. So I have worked the entire time I've had my kiddos and I've started businesses. I've loved it. It's really fun. Honestly, I involve them as part of it. And it's just, I think the biggest thing is setting those expectations early on, like the same way you would teach them not to touch like a hot stove. You just teach them what it means for you to be in a meeting. You teach them what it means for, why does mom work? I talk to them about this all the time. They're like, oh, we have to go do this for work. I'm like, yeah. And that's why we're able to have X, Y, Z's because I do this and you guys are part of the family and this is ways that you contribute. So I think it's really just that initial level setting with your kids' expectations as to what life looks like, being at home, being homeschooled and also having a working parent and that's running a business. And then really just finding ways to include them in it and make them feel a part of the process has been really helpful for me.
I think it's like, I know for me, as we're kind of starting this journey, I think a lot of it is like undoing like the rigidity and like the black and white thinking to where it's like you just said, there's a lot of it that's like integration, right? To where it's like letting them know, like, I'm going to be in this meeting. This is a boundary. Me being in this meeting is connected to this. And it's like, we're so used to essentially like copying and pasting because like the school pipeline is like a pipeline for a 9 to 5 job. And so I think it's really interesting of like a lot of it is I have found for me, and I don't know if you found this with other parents that you've talked to, like giving yourself permission for it to look different. Of like, even when I've stepped into kind of like, what does this look like? And starting to ask questions and starting to do research, it's like, I would catch myself almost trying to replicate like, these are the school hours because this is what I know when it's not true. Have you seen that?
I think it's a really common pitfall. And I think it's something that holds people back from homeschooling that would otherwise choose. Like I talk to a lot of families that are like, I really want to homeschool. It's something that I believe in, that I think would be right for our family, that is a path that we'd be interested in. But what's holding them back is fear of failing. Basically, it's their child's education and they see this as like, if I fail, I'm failing my child, which obviously as parents, none of us want to do. And so I think absolutely giving yourself grace, understanding what you would be giving them is so much more than they would be getting at school. Giving them, and it's not the same. Like you said, having to break down those barriers of understanding, like you're not trying to recreate school. If you wanted them to be in school, then send them to school. You don't need to have the same structure, the same timeline, the same hours as the school system. So, you'll see, like, especially if you go on Instagram and like look up, homeschool families, you'll see people who set up entire classrooms in their house with desks and chalkboards, and they have a school bell and they have like a rigid time in terms of like the schedule for each subject and when they eat. And it's like, oh, if you're going to do that, send them to school. The benefit of homeschooling, especially if you're also trying to run a business and have a sense of self, is the fact that there is so much flexibility. You can do so much curriculum in so much less time, and your child is still receiving more targeted, strong curriculum that's guided for where their actual needs are and what their actual skill set is, than they would if they were in a classroom of, 30 kids at varied levels. So it's really just creating space for yourself to give yourself grace, to flex things to the way that works best for you, to look at your actual child. And if you have multiple children, oftentimes it's not the same one size fits all for each child. Like I have 3. I will tell you right now, my daughter, my firstborn, she is, she can take curriculum, she can go sit down, she'll do it, she actually enjoys it. And my son, no, it's going to be more like hands-on, creative, like I'm a part of it. And then the third one, I'll probably have to just like glue to a chair maybe. But yeah, it's not the same for all 3 of them.
The third kid, the wild one. You know what's so interesting is I didn't realize until you said it, my eyes actually got teary when you were like the fear of failing. And I didn't realize that was even like an emotion that I was holding around. That's why I was like, this is so topical, because it's like, I'm literally in this transition right now of like, we really are afraid to fail. And it's like, as entrepreneurs, we have taken big risks, and like entrepreneurship is so vulnerable. Like that's what a lot of people don't realize. Like even in some of our discussions, right? In coaching, it's like you have to be visible and you have to like share things that you may not always want to share. And there's parts of your life that it's just like, it is difficult. And it's like to think about that now you are responsible for their education. It's like, it's heavy, but it's also so freeing at the same time to know that like you get to like help them step into things that they're interested in. Like even listening to you talk about your daughter and entrepreneurship and marketing and stuff like that. It's just really, really beautiful. And I would be curious, like, what do you tell people? Like if they're like, I know this is a thing that I want, but I feel really afraid that I'm going to fail, or I feel like it's not going to work with my schedule. Like, how do you help them through that?
Yeah, and that's really where HomeGrown Minds was born. So this is where I take my instructional design expertise and I customize it to individual families that are looking for support with homeschooling. So, we have families who want to homeschool, but they do, they have full-time jobs. They are entrepreneurs. They're running businesses and households and multiple children and sports schedules, and it's a lot. So while they want their child home and they want that customized education, they don't necessarily want to be responsible for researching, planning, implementing, grading, doing everything you have to do with your state to submit to the state for your results. So that's something that they, just like everything else in life, you can offboard that to somebody else. And that's something that I have done with HomeGrown Minds, is I provide these support systems to families that want to homeschool, but want somebody else to take the responsibility of writing the curriculum, of doing the data tracking, progress monitoring, submitting what they need to the state, so that they are stuck. And, you'll see haters online that say like, well, that's not homeschooling because you have someone else doing it for you. Your child is at home receiving a custom education. There's a lot of nasty comments about that.
I can't believe that's a thing. If you're not watching the video right now, I just like, my face can never hide my emotions, but I just like, what the fuck?
It's so nasty. That's what social media is for, right? So nasty. And you see people just tearing each other down in these homeschool groups, saying if you get a tutor, if you ask for help, then you're not really homeschooling. That's ridiculous. Like I always make the analogy, like I don't change the oil in my car. I don't know how to do that. Like I still drive my car. It's still my car, but I don't change the oil in it. Like you're not your child's pediatrician. It's okay to get support with the things that you're doing to support your child. And so going like education, it's not just going online and buying a workbook and sitting them down to do it. There's a reason that there's educators, that there are degrees and certifications that surround this field, and instructional designers. There's a custom approach for each child, and it's standards aligned, and it's progress monitoring. There's so many parts to it that if you haven't done, it's okay to need help with. And of course, you can also find ways to navigate that on your own if that's the way you want to go about it. But if you don't, and if you are in a position where you'd like to get support, it is out there. There's a lot of opportunity for support in homeschooling.
That's so interesting to me that that's even a thing, that it's like it's like homeschool privilege or something. Like you're only a real homeschooler if you do this. I'm too early in to see any of that at this point, but I'm like, I definitely want all of the help. Like, yeah, I think even between my husband and I, we've talked about kind of like where our strengths are and like where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, like how we each play a role in this. And so I'm curious to know, what does that look like for you in the way that you guys are doing this? And what have you found helpful, like since you've been doing this with now your 8-year-old for many, many years? What are some things that you've tried that maybe didn't work, or some things that you've tried that you're like, this actually helps a lot?
Yeah. So I think you have to really step back and look at your child. I think you need to do like there's a lot of, especially if you go out and you get somebody that's a homeschool coach that can help you with those initial assessments to identify where they're at, where they have gaps, where their skills are, higher and lower. And then once you have that initial data and you look at how your child operates, and these are all assessments that we do at HomeGrown Mind. When we first start working with the family, we assess the family's needs, the child's needs as a learner, and then also their skills. And once you have all that data, then you really have to sit back and think about, okay, well, how am I going to approach this child? Like I mentioned, my daughter, she's really good at, if I give her arithmetic and I show her how to do it, I'm like, okay, now go work these problems. She'll do it. Like, and she doesn't complain. She's happy to do it. She's happy to go read by herself. She doesn't need quite as much in terms of like hands-on projects. She's okay with just doing the work. But then if you have another child, and I get this all the time from families that are like, oh, well, my child's not doing well in school because they are so smart, but they won't engage with the activity. They just won't do the work. They fail their tests, and yet they're so bright. They come home and they're so, whatever. And typically it's a gifted student profile, which I've worked so much with gifted students. I find them so fascinating. For a gifted child, if you are giving them something that they don't see the value in doing, if they find it mundane or they already know how to do it, or they just don't understand why they would care to learn how to do it, they're not going to do it. So you put that child in a school system, well, they're being given tasks they're not going to complete. If you bring them home and homeschool them and continue to give them tasks they don't see value in, they're still not going to do them. And that's where you're going to be fighting with them every day and just trying to figure out, like, what am I doing wrong? Maybe just put them back in school. I can't do this. So you have to look at the child and figure out what it is that they need to be successful. A gifted child needs assessments that are going to be higher level blooms. They're going to be creative. They're going to be project oriented and something that they see value in. So that's something that I've really found with my own kids, is just having to look at each of them as individuals, do those initial upfront assessments to identify like what they need, where their gaps are, and then serving each child separately based on what their needs, their learning styles, what motivates them. My daughter is on the gifted side of things. And so the entrepreneurship is a really great way for me to tie in. We can do reading, we can do math, we can do a lot with, STEM through entrepreneurship, and I'll be hitting all the standards while doing something that she thinks that she's decided. She thinks that she's in charge.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously, so my oldest is very high IQ and also is recently diagnosed with ADHD. So it's like the school system, I think it's like the realization of like, it is going back to what you said about teachers. I think for me, a lot of it is like, teachers are doing the best they can with what they have. Like, it is literally not their fault. I think that teachers have one of the hardest jobs there is. I could never, but that many kids, that many different personalities, navigating all of that. And that's what I don't like, is that I think a lot of people are like, have this idea that like, you don't like teachers when you homeschool. And it's like, no, that has nothing to do with it. I love teachers. And I know that like, they're not paid very well. Like, they don't get the resources. They're having to work within certain confinements. Like, I know that. And I wasn't in the school system the way you were. So how do you feel like people know like when it's time to homeschool? Like what are signs that people are like thinking or feeling that are probably a good time for them to shift in that direction?
I think there's two ways it goes. I've talked to families that have just come from both directions. Sometimes it's that their child is having a really hard time with school, whether it's because they're failing classes, they're not academically successful, or they're not socially successful. They're coming home crying, they don't want to go. Sometimes what's going on, sometimes you don't. But so I think when you're in that situation, it's time to take a step back and think like, this is a child. Like, they have such a small emotional capacity for dealing with these types of traumas. Like, think about us. If we went to work every single day and we were abused at work and we felt ostracized, like, would we be very successful? Probably not. And we're meant to be able to handle things like this much better than a child is. They don't have those experiences to draw from. They don't have the coping mechanisms, and they're not getting that support at school. I mean, I think a lot of parents can probably say, like, I've emailed the teacher, nothing's changing. Yeah, well, that teacher's watching, 40 kids at a time. They're not in your child's pocket. They don't hear what's being said. They don't know what's going on. They just know the global picture of the classroom. So I think that's one time that I've talked to a lot of families that are like, what do we do now? And the answer is like, maybe pull them out, maybe take some time to like level set, to do some social emotional healing and work with them. And like, academics isn't everything, right? Like part of it is also just raising happy human beings that are going to be successful in life because they're happy, like whether, no matter what they choose to do, like they're happy, they're fulfilled, they're confident. So that's part of it. And then the other side is I talk to a lot of parents who just internally feel like it's what they want. Like maybe their child's doing great in school and they're like academically thriving and have tons of friends, but they just feel like they're missing out on something. And that was a big thing for me. I just knew that I would feel I was missing out on a lot of my children's childhood if they left, even like the sibling bonding, like the way that they bond together, being together all the time, every day is so different than if they were sent different directions, early in the morning until afternoon. And then we have extracurriculars in the evening. So we're all running different directions, different sports fields. It doesn't leave a lot of time for family time, and it doesn't leave a lot of time to be a part of their childhood. It starts to feel like you're more of a facilitator and less, an integral part of their day. So those are kind of the two different ways I've seen families approach the decision to move to homeschooling, just based on what their situation is.
Yeah. Okay. So how long does it actually take per day or per week to homeschool your kids?
I think it depends on how you look at it. I come from the belief that any time that we spend with our children engaging with them, we are teaching them. We are showing them how we see the world. Like they're learning so much, like just driving in the car. Like my kids aren't allowed to have tablets. Like we're in the car, they're drawing maps of directions. They're talking about where we're going. They're trying to understand like who we're going to be with when we're there. They help me in the grocery store. Like they're a part of the world. They're learning through existing in the world around them and watching me as a model and how to do it. So that's part of the answer. The other part would be in terms of actual like sitting down and running curriculum. Really at the younger ages in like elementary school, if you can get 20 to 30 minutes of arithmetic and 20 to 30 minutes of reading phonics in your child's day, you've done it. You've won. We're looking at like less than an hour there. And that's for really most of elementary school. Everything else, the social studies, the science, they're picking those things up in the world around them. Typically, extracurriculars, if they're doing sports or some kind of a dance or music program, they're getting their extracurriculars. Like they're gathering everything else. They're just learning in the world that surrounds them. It's really more so just an hour or less of phonics and arithmetic. As you get into older grades, like middle school, it's a little more intensive because you do want to bring in a little bit more like intentional science. They do start to learn things like chemistry and things. So you want to have American history. You want to bring in some of those things. Now we're looking at 2 hours a day? It's still pretty minimal when you consider them going to school for 8 hours. And then once you get to high school, if you're doing it right, your kid can graduate high school with an associate's degree or more. So it's a really cool, and they also get to really hone in on the things that matter to them, whether that's like a sport or an instrument, whatever it is, they're extracurricular, they're like really into at that point. They'd have a lot of time to actually perfect it and spend time doing it rather than squeezing it at the end of their day.
Yeah. And I feel like that just like you saying that, like I knew this from the research that I've done and obviously from working with you, but I feel like probably everybody that listens to that is like, absolutely, there's no way, right? I feel like it blows our minds, and it brings me to like every time when I'm like working with a client and I like will redo their schedule. And so for some of my clients that are working like 60, 70 hours a week, and it's like we cut back and like redesign their schedule and they can work like 20 hours a week, and they're like, there's no way. Like I had a client in a VIP that was like, I literally, like, I just don't know anybody successful that works those amount of hours. And I was like, would you like to meet all of my clients? And so I feel like there's this disconnect in our brain of like, because we know school needs to be X amount of hours, but like you said, it's getting diluted. It's all the different behaviors. It's like having to manage all the actual like learning time is so little. And it's like, I think that for me, understanding that was like, okay, well, then when I look at like what I actually need for my business and for myself, like this can fit, like it is possible. So I hope that people listening, even though it probably blew their mind, also feel like this is possible for them to be able to integrate. And I love that you just brought up like living and that being like how we learn, because I think that our society has built like it makes us lose like our childlike wonder. It makes us lose curiosity. Like we just are like, we become these like task robots as we get older because of the way that we're trained. And so we also, my kids don't get tablets in the car, but they don't get tablets at restaurants. To each their own. I understand why people do it, but I think that there's so much that kids can learn just in living and having conversation. It's like my kids, we got a new coffee maker and my kids now know how to make my coffee and my husband's coffee. Huge
Smart.
perk for us.
Yes.
But they're also using measuring spoons and like, it's like, it really, I think my point of this is like, can it really be that simple?
Honestly, I think that when people doubt the numbers that I just said, because they're like, okay, so you're just not really teaching them. I like to pull,
oh my God.
I like to
The
pull
homeschool hate world. I'm like, people say
there's a lot of hate. Go on social media, Kelsey. World out there. No, but so I do get a lot of like, okay, so hold on, so you're like an unschooler, right? It's like, no, not at all. I'm a firm believer in education. I believe education is pinnacle to a child's success in life. But so my child is going into kindergarten this fall. He's already reading at a second grade level and doing second, third grade math. My daughter is going into the third grade and she reads and does math at a sixth grade level. So when I say that, aside from proving that they are learning through this process, I also just want to point out that, so look at my daughter, for example. If she's going into third grade, if I were to put her in the local elementary school in a third grade classroom, her math class, she would be learning some like double digit adding. She's doing long division with 2 digits. So what would be the purpose of either she's there for 8 hours a day? What is she getting from that class? What is she learning? She already knows how to do that. It's useless information to her. And that would be the same in all of her subjects. And so that's why when you look at homeschooling and I say 20 minutes, it's not just 20 minutes of math. It's 20 minutes of targeted math toward the skills that they're actually at. Where if you're sitting in a 30-minute or in a classroom of 30 students for 45 minutes, and you're being given the same task as the kid to the left and right of you, this kid might literally not know how to spell their own name. And this kid might be able to, write an essay, but you're all getting the exact same task. So one of those 2 children is being failed, either the one who's being given a task that's way above their level and they're going to disengage with and not even try, or the child who is being given something far too easy for them and is going to disengage because what is the point in me proving to you I can do something I could do 3 years ago? One way or another.
Literally my son. He's like, I'm going to go fuck around and get in trouble because I'm bored.
I'm going to read my book. I don't think I'm going to do that. Like if you want to see my read workbook from, 3 years ago and I'll show you.
Yeah.
But so really when you look at it that way, and I also always hear parents talking like, oh, the homework. And it's like, you could be doing their entire school day in less time than you spend doing their homework in the evening. It could be their whole school day in the amount of time you do homework. That's crazy. And it just goes to show how much it's not just the time waste of, all the transitions and the getting everyone back on track and taking classes that don't apply to you or your interests, but it's also, and a lot of it is childcare, like a lot of it is built. That's why the education system was built, was to provide child working families. So a lot of that time is fluff and it's not hidden. Like if you're in there, it's openly acknowledged, like this is fluff time. But so taking out all of that and then also taking into account having targeted lessons that are actually to their skill level, 20 minutes doing long division for my daughter, great use of time. 45 minutes doing 2-digit addition, total waste of her time. So it's really just honing in on what matters and then making that time count instead of, just going along with the fluff. And then they also don't learn to really challenge themselves in those situations. They're like, okay, well, if I do the bare minimum, I get an A, or if I don't, I fail, and I don't care because I don't see the value. Either way, who's winning there? The A student or the F student? They're both not getting what they need.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because like, I know for me, what I felt was like a lot of the things that they weren't getting. So as a dual entrepreneur household, I think it's like, I'm so invested in like personal growth and evolution. And like you said, there's a whole side of this. It's like, okay, yes, we very much as a society value education. And like we were told as kids, like we were rewarded for being smart, right? And also, what about our happiness? What about our fulfillment? What about us finding and being paid for things we're passionate about? Like there's this whole like side of things that are life skills based, that are how to interact in the world. Like it's interesting when people say that this social skill part of homeschool. I'm like, you guys know they're sitting at desks where they're like not allowed to talk. And I think the final straw for me was when my kids were getting 15 minutes of recess. And like we are a very active, and like health is one of our highest values. So I'm like, you guys are going to move every day. Like this is, I'm like 15 minutes. Like, so you're upset that they're not sitting and they're moving too much and they're talking too much, but like you give them 15 minutes outside. Like, how does this work?
Right.
So I think it's really interesting because that's what I was feeling, is I was like, there's this whole other side of like life and your character as a human that's not addressed. And it's not their fault. It's just not the school's job. But it's like you said, it's like we spend this much time on academics when I feel like academically, like I don't want to say I don't care, but like I don't care what level my child is on. I care that they can function. I didn't graduate college. I barely graduated high school. I'm doing all right. You know what I mean? So I think
I know
that's part of it too.
People that are that way. So many people that, that for whatever reason, the system wasn't successful for you or for them. You know what I mean? It just didn't meet you where you needed it to be. And if it had, then maybe you would have done that, or maybe you still wouldn't have, and you would have gone a different path, but you wouldn't have wasted 18 years of your life, right? So that's the biggest thing. We have so many students that they're not going to go to college. Like, that's okay. You don't have to go to college, especially this day and age, like things are changing. It's not necessarily a prerequisite of success by any means. You're a perfect example. But in the end, you should be putting your time toward learning things that are going to better your future. So if you know you're not going to go to college, like my youngest, there's a decent chance that his future is going to be in some form of like construction. Maybe he'll turn into engineering and he will want to go to college, but right now all he cares about is building and creating and using tools. So if that is how that continues, then the best thing for him would be getting life skills and learning how to do things, like do trades, learning how to build, learning how to, think creatively in those ways. Maybe learning how to build a business so he can work for himself. Those would be useful tools for him. Sitting in class, learning about American history is not so valuable to his life. So I just think that, having the autonomy to figure out what works for you and your child, it's huge. It changes the trajectory of their life and the way that they value learning. Because it's not, we're talking about education. Well, sure, that's talking about curriculum and schooling and assessments and more the standardized approach. But learning and being lifelong learners, like Kelsey, I feel like I know you well enough so you love learning. You're always learning things. So whether you chose to finish high school or college, like that's irrelevant. That's education. Learning is something that is of value to you. So I think separating those two things is really important and helping kids understand that early on. Like, well, I do like to learn. I do like to engage with the world and figure out how it works and manipulate it in the way that works best for me. That doesn't have to necessarily be like a paper assessment. And another thing you touched on was the socialization of homeschoolers. I think it's really important. It does get a lot of more of that hate I was talking about, that, homeschool students.
Add it to my list of like, this is stuff that happens.
Yeah, like they're not socialized. Homeschool students have more social opportunity, and it's real social opportunity, than any child that's in school. We have to turn things down every day because there's too many things to be doing. If you ever talk to a homeschool child in the world, like, we were at Publix, my daughter was ordering her stuff by herself. And I came over and the lady asked me, she's like, hey, what school does she go to? I said, oh, she's homeschooled. So I knew that was going to be the case based on the way she talked to me. Like, you can just tell when you talk to a homeschool child that they're used to seeing how adults engage. They're used to being coached in how to talk, because you mentioned that the school system is not responsible for their social emotional health. They're there for the academics. Okay, but that's where they are 40 hours a week. So if they're going to have them 40 hours a week, then somebody has to be coaching them in these things. Like, when things go wrong at school, like, who tells them there's a consequence? You get a call home maybe, but who's showing them and modeling how to, have conflict resolution, how to engage differently in the future, how to have proper communication, or to self-advocate in an appropriate way? Like, who's teaching those skills? Because as you said, it's not the schools, but that's who has them. So there's, like you mentioned, by the time you get them home, you have a few hours to do dinner, showers, homework, and extracurricular, and to bed to go back the next day. So where are they getting those skills if it's not at school?
Yeah. And I think that's the stuff. And it's saying that now and talking this through, I actually was thinking back of like my time in school. And when I was younger, I liked school. I was in the gifted program. And then it was, the turn of in middle school, I think, like starting to get bullied. And then from that, that was kind of started down my path of like my self-destructive behaviors. And you touched on something earlier, like the word confidence. And I always say, and Eric and I talk about it often, about like literally if there's one thing that I can hope for my children, it's for them to have self-confidence. Because what I realize in my own journey is I'm like, okay, I was smart, I was gifted academically, like my brain intellectually was okay, but I was not emotionally okay. And because of what I was experiencing in my personal life, my confidence kept lowering, which then created the pattern of self-destructive behaviors. And then that showed up academically for me. And so I think it's really interesting because it's like you look at one note, right? You look at, okay, my grades started to decline and my school attendance started to decline. I barely graduated high school. I attempted to go to college, but didn't because I kept getting arrested. It's like you can look at all those things and be like, but academically, and that it's like you don't see all of that, is what I'm trying to say. And so I think there's a part of this that because I know that that's my journey for my children, it's like, how can I, this like makes me emotional. How can I make sure that they like love themselves, that like they are the most confident in who they are. So because that's what matters to me is like their life path and how they show up and who they are in the world over like what kind of math they can do, you know? And so I think that's my like emotional tie to it for myself.
And I think as parents, if any of us were to sit down and like truly think for a moment, and maybe you don't even have to really think that long. Like if you were to ask yourself the question right now, what is the most important thing if I get to pick one thing that my child has going forward in life, or three things? I guarantee that almost every parent would not start with like, I want them to be the best mathematician in the world. I want them to be the like, it's going to be that you want them to have confidence. You want them to be happy. You want them to, have that self-esteem. You want them to be kind people that make a positive impact on the world. Like, these are the things, if you think into the future of your adult children, what are you hoping for their life when we all leave eventually, right? And we're leaving them behind to figure it out. When that happens, what do you want for them? Do you want them to be making the most money possible and have the biggest house possible and the best car possible? Or do you want them to be potentially like not having any of those things, but truly happy and truly confident and truly making a positive impact? And if you sit down and you think to yourself, well, what are the things I want my child to have in that scenario? Then the next question will be, well, who's providing that to them right now? Where are they getting that training right now? Because these aren't skills that you just are born with. You're not born just a kind person that is confident. These are things that we learn through experience. We learn through modeling. We learn through trial and error and having someone be there to catch us when we fall and teach us like, yeah, that didn't go the way we planned, but how can we approach it differently? Or how can we be okay with the fact that we failed at that? These are the things that you have to be coaching. And like we've said, like if you're not getting that at school, but that's where all your time is spent, how are you working toward that future vision that you have for your child's life? How are you going to get them there? And this is the time that they learn those initial skills. It's not like, oh, great, now that you're 22, let's talk about being kind and making responsible decisions.
Sure.
It's a little bit too late at that point, right? Like right now is when we're shaping their internal picture of themselves and what they want for themselves and how they want to be perceived in the world.
Yeah, it's so good, Megan. It's so like, I feel like that you have given so much permission to people today of just like, this is possible and it doesn't take that much time and it doesn't have to look this specific way. So for the people who are listening and they're like, okay, like this is something that's been on my mind, or I have thought about this and I think I do want to kind of make this decision. I love what you just gave about like, think about these questions and answer these questions. What else would you tell people, like maybe a more tactical place of like, where do they start? Like, what do they do? They're like, okay, I think I wanted to homeschool. Now what?
I think it depends on your schedule, type of person. If you are somebody who's like, I really want to do this on my own, I feel like I can do that, then I think you just have to really dive into the research. There's a lot of research involved in looking into what type of curriculum aligns with who you are as a family, your family values, with the way that you want your children to engage with education, the style that they learn, the style that you teach. Because we have to remember, it's not all about the way the child learns when you're the teacher, right? Like I know I couldn't handle if I had to go by a script. Like there's some curriculums out there that's literally like a script and just read, like I say this, they say that. I would go crazy. Like I would lose my mind. I couldn't handle that. I would be so bored.
I'm
So I
like,
know
absolutely not.
for that.
I have too many jokes to throw in there.
But no, so like you have to also consider yourself, and you have to be okay with things like, you know what, like I'm not a huge screen time person. At the same time, if there's something that like truly I'm not going to be the best teacher for, like maybe Spanish, like I don't speak Spanish. Like it's okay to find a really strong online curriculum that they go and they take these classes online. And even at young ages, they have the best curriculums where you can like have videos and music, and then they practice things. Like there's ways of doing it. And so researching what's going to work best for your family, that would be the first step if you want to go on your own. If you don't, there are people out there to support you. HomeGrown Minds is an example of that. You know, these are people like myself who have, you know, the background, the degree, the experience, and like literally do this all the time. Like this is all I talk about is education, right? So I know all of the curriculums. I can guide you. I can help write it. I can also do your initial assessments and help you evaluate your needs as a person, as a family, as individual students, what their skill gaps are. All those assessments are part of our process. So you start there, you get all the information that's needed to make a strong decision, and then we find curriculums that work for you from there. One thing I like to advise against, and if you're just getting started and this is how you want to do it, then go for it. But I personally don't love like the one size fits all curriculums. So you'll go on and you'll hear people talk about like, well, which curriculum should I use for reading? And then they'll be like, oh, I just use XYZ for everything. It's, you know, it's not giving that custom approach that you really go for in homeschool. You're still getting a little bit of that like one size fits all. And you know, there are strong pieces to various curricula. There's also like weaknesses. So being able to identify like, this is good for that, but not so much for this, and picking and choosing from each thing accordingly.
Yeah. And I feel like one thing that's like helping me in this process is like giving myself permission to like not necessarily get it perfect or right the first time, because it is that fear of failure. And so, yeah, like digging into the research, like we ordered 2 different math curriculums, like one for Brooklyn and one for Cameron, because Emerson's 4, so I'm not getting her a curriculum at this point. But we ordered, I think it was Math Mammoth for Brooklyn and Beast Academy for Cameron. And it was just like through their research, we had them do the placement test. And then I think we did essentials in writing. And so it's just like you said, digging into how do they learn? What are they like asking all those questions. And like it does take time. But I feel like it's like once you do that and you know your kids, and then it's just like, okay, now let's try this and see how it is. And like giving yourself permission to, I feel like something that's going to be important for us. And I don't know if you do this with your kids at all. I'd love to hear your perspective of like almost getting their feedback about like, how do you feel like this is working well for you? Do you like, what do you like about this, not like about this, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, I don't even have to ask them because I can tell immediately if they like it.
I love you. Yeah. No filter.
There's one I've been keeping an eye on for a long time, not as like their main curriculum, but they always want to play like their friends play games on their tablets, and we don't do that. We don't own tablets. We don't play games. So there's this one curriculum that was like, okay, this looks like a game. Like maybe this could like solve that itch for them and also like be something learning. So I bought it, and all 3 of them were like, absolutely not.
They were like, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, they were like, that's okay. We actually don't need a tablet that badly. So yeah, I think you pick up really quickly like what works for them, and then and then you'll see what you can't get them off of. Where you're like, hey, you've completed your lesson for today, and they're like, hold on, I'm gonna explore this a little bit further, and that's when you found what works.
Yeah,
I would also say though, even within math or within reading, pairing together different things. So like for math, we don't go with just one math curriculum, even just like we pair together like, well, this is really great for application. This is really great for arithmetic. These are more like word problem association, like just finding all the different ways that you encounter math. And then of course there's like the actual like more STEM project-based stuff, finding all those different things and piecing them together. It's more fun for everybody.
Yeah, that's interesting because I did notice that even in like, I think it was the Math Mammoth book, to where it was like, it had links for other like resources that were like more specific like that. So I do think it's so incredible that there are so many resources. And I didn't realize until diving in that there's so many free resources too. Like we found a financial curriculum that teaches about budgeting and all this stuff that was free. It's like there's so many people that genuinely just put out like free resources for kids to learn, which I think is incredible.
Yes. And sell like used workbooks that maybe like they didn't write in. I mean, if you're doing it on a budget, it doesn't have to be expensive. There's a lot of opportunity. And also you'll find even the more expensive curriculum, if you research their sites, a lot of times they offer grants for families who are lower income or just not low income, just like, I can't afford to spend $150 on this. They offer, a sliding scale.
Yeah. What about when you order curriculum and then they do a sale the next day? I was like, wow, cool.
Macy's, you can't exactly take it back and start over.
What the heck? Anyways, thank you so much, Meghan. This has been so helpful. Just honestly for me, obviously I love seeing you. I'm obsessed with your work. I think you are literally just changing people's lives. So if there's a mom listening and she's like, all right, I got to talk to somebody. I need to talk to Meghan. I want her to help me figure this out. How do they find you? Where do they follow you? Where can we get more info?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Mindful Leaders LWR. And then I have my email address. You can always reach out to me where I'm at homegrownminds.com. And you can find me there. And I'm always booking discovery calls. I love taking on new families. I do kind of keep it limited just because I like to be able to truly customize the approach for everybody. So it's something that, as I go into a school year, I kind of set up my schedule and make sure, as you have taught me, Kelsey, to not overextend, right? So yes.
Don't be writing those checks you can't cash, girl.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure that all the links for everybody are in the show notes. I highly, highly recommend just booking a discovery call and talking with Meghan, seeing how she can help you. I know that we will absolutely be using her services to help us, especially as we navigate into this first year. So thank you so much again for your time today. We will make sure we grab all those links for the show notes. And for those of you listening, please check out Meghan, follow her journey. She's incredible. If you're interested in homeschooling, definitely book a discovery call with her because there is just so much out there for your children. And I got to say, I think, for us entrepreneurs, we just think differently, and to be able to foster that kind of thinking and the character part of it is just such a huge part of it. So maybe I'll think differently after I dive into this and am like going crazy, but I'm hoping not.
You've got this.
Thank you, lady. All right, guys, we'll talk next week.